I should quickly throw this one in that this video is not intended for kids, so YouTube, if you're watching this, kindly off. Let's begin. Thomas and Friends YouTube nostalgia is something we all experience. Seeing videos of your favorite little blue tank engine and his friends in rather silly manners. There is one series of videos in particular that stick out to me. And it's one that many of you might recognize. A series of videos made by our one James Farr. Yep, it is none other than the well-loved series we all know and tolerate, Transformers. A parody series based on Thomas and Friends and Transformers. Needless to say, this video is a nostalgia trip is something else. This series of videos is simply iconic for nostalgia value, and for just being a good Thomas parody that doesn't rely on Thomas being a gritty, demonic spider thing. And as the episodes went on, they were actually getting a little more faithful to the source material, that being like the Thomas show itself. That being said, Transformers is somewhat overlooked in my opinion, despite the fact that apparently there is slightly became a content farming empire or something. Mainly around the fourth episode, or something I don't know. And needless to say, I am a bit of a fan of Transformers, and I personally think it is pretty good. The series itself has existed for well over a decade. However, Hit Entertainment decided to quickly remove it due to copyright infringement, which, yeah, it sucked, but James Farr, like the legend he was, decided to re-upload them. And this is where we get an infamous, kind of a joke in Thomas and Friends, Optimus Prime. Clearly a spin on Optimus Prime, but I'm not a super fan of Transformers, but yeah, seeing Thomas being a cool Thomas is kind of cool. Anyway, there is already a much better edited review on this whole series made by Waxworld, but I don't think it would be that bad if I shed some light on it myself. The series was mainly came from James Farr wanting to make a little animation for his, at the time, 1-year-old son, Vector Farr. Vector Farr was pretty intimate into Thomas and Friends and early at his young childhood. James Farr himself wasn't really super into Thomas and wasn't as familiar with it, but wanting to make something for his son, and for his son also liking Transformers, he decided to combine both into a harmless parody series. So, I'll do a little summary on the episodes, certain things that happen, things I personally like about them, and then we'll go from there. Episode 1 was a pretty basic 2-minute pilot. So it basically goes that after Thomas was done, Thomas and Vector are on their way back to home, back to like their home or something, mainly after doing some work, but then they get a call from a sort of like AI system named Troubletron, a character I never really cared much for, but voice actors good at least. Essentially, this first episode event essentially is about Thomas and going into his Optimus mode and essentially fighting Megatrain, who is basically robotified Spencer. And then a pretty basic fight then unfolds. along with this banger of a line. That got savage, damn. But Spencer then kind of makes Thomas eat lead. But nah, Thomas boy ain't gonna give up that easily. Then Vector engages fizzling fireboxes, which then initiates Thomas into spraying a water cannon, deplenishing Spencer's fire and essentially shutting him off. Yeah, they're more like robots this time around, which is okay. Then Spencer kind of falls down on a crossing where James and Claire Farr are driving, and then they get held up or something. And that's it. Also, Howard makes a cameo or two. And then we have young Vector, who, as we do realize, kind of has a lot of like pop culture references, I guess, with his dialogue. Personally, I think this was a pretty solid way to start the series. But this essentially being the first delve into Thomas and Friends Transformers, it's pretty good. Something weird in it is that something I want to point out is that Thomas is depicted with a more generic whistle in this. So, yeah, Thomas is essentially stuck with a stock sounding whistle in the series. And although Thomas's design isn't completely faithful to how he is meant to look, it's still close enough to the point you can tell is meant to be Thomas. And from then on, the series actually started to go into proper fruition. Next up, was Transformer 200T, or I I never even realized it was meant to be like Transformers 2 with a T, so it was like toot, you know, train joke. I never actually realized that when I was younger, which is honestly kind of funny. The most high quality versions you can find of these episodes do not have the original Thomas and Friends theme in it, even if the original uploads had them. Presumably for copyright reasons, he had to replace it with an original soundtrack. It was also kind of apparent that the animation seemingly got a bit of a boost up in budget this time around, even resulting in Thomas getting an update. His face now had shading around it, and he had gained a front coupling chain, which is kind of cool. Thomas isn't depicted with a whistle this time around, but it would probably just remain the stock whistle regardless. Troubletron also seems to get an upgrade as well, now finally getting more pixels, so essentially then they have episode 2 has Thomas and Vector running off to the smelter's yard because Spencer is back at it again under a new name, Galvatrain, which is kind of cool. Thomas also says this as they are before he transforms. Engage unauthorized but non-commercial trademark violation. Yeah, it's going to become relevant later, I promise. Vector activates Thomas into his transform, and then Thomas believes he has a chance to put Spencer in his place once again. But this time, Spencer, well, he's begun a bit of a rebuild under the new name Galvatrain. This time, he actually tries to warp Thomas, like warp his firebox, maybe? I don't really know. But then Vector activates Combiner Class Transformation, which essentially brings Percy, James, Gordon, and Henry over to transform into Optimus Supreme. And then, well, that's kind of badass looking, not gonna lie. And then the Combiner is pretty easily able to just squish Spencer into a pile of cinders and ashes, most likely. Except then they come across Unicrane. Essentially, it's Cranky. So, yeah, Cranky apparently is a Transformer now. Not gonna question how that's possible. Then, To associate that, they inject lift kit modification, and thus Harold bringing in Harold to activate like wing mode, and then Supreme ends up flying into space, and in the most cool way imaginable, just kills Spencer. Cranky. Damn. And that was episode 2. Oh, and there's a statue of Topham Hatt, but he will be relevant later. Much later. So, yeah, that was episode 2. And it's significantly an upgrade since episode 1. Now, the budget seemingly got bigger to actually allow more Thomas characters to appear. And I have some issues with them, personally. But it's more or less nitpicks, because I personally don't have much of an issue with them, but of course I can nitpick when I want to nitpick, so. Percy, think it's kind of silly. Percy seems to be missing his piston. He appears to be missing a valve gear, and also it has 6 wheels. His right porthole appears to be missing. He doesn't have any white on his front, and he has the wrong shaped footplate. Aside from that, he's perfectly fine. And also, we don't really see him have a bunker. James, well, his wheel configuration is wrong, and he's missing a tender. They also have pretty cartoony looking expressions this time, but still recognizable to the point you could probably tell who's meant to be who. They don't try to. Mr. Farr doesn't attempt to make the faces not look like the characters they are meant to represent. Gordon, he kind of looks a little incomplete without his redlining. And much like James, he doesn't have his tender. He also appears to be missing his cylinders, which is kind of weird. And Gordon, he's pretty cranky looking. And Henry, I always loved Henry, man. Look at his silly little smile. He's such a goofy guy. He reuses James's firebox PNG, I guess, for James's firebox, just recolored. And much like Percy and James and Gordon, he appears to be missing a valve gear and a tender. And also appears to be missing whistle too. That also applies with Gordon. As inaccurate as the engine's designs are, I can't help but like them. They're so cute. I love them. Henry, you're so silly. And that was episode 2. I say episode 2 might be pretty high on the list of one of my favorite episodes from the series. But of course, Transformers couldn't just stop there. Next up is Transformers 3, released around 2011. Animation is really starting to get updated, and now it takes place at night. Synonymous of this episode goes that Thomas and Vector are on their way home, and both of them are, needless to say, pretty scared. Because nighttime, as you might know, is when the spoopy trains come out to play. Yeah, they are not taking this so kindly. Oh, and by the way, in case any of you may have not noticed, Thomas's control panels appear to have been updated. Not very, and then very useful. Yeah, maybe it was simplified so Vector could use it, maybe. Maybe that's why Thomas looks so silly. Yeah, that actually probably explains it. Also, we actually see that there's like number panels to like Vector to interact with the engines, I'd imagine. Also having Pac-Man and Angry Birds on there. Okay. You may have noticed what's Hero doing here. Oh, he'll appear. I hate to spoil it, but he will appear later. But as usual, Troubletron informs Thomas and Vector that there appears to be another villain on the loose. And once again, Thomas is depicted with a stock cartoon whistle, but different one this time? Okay, I don't know why he has a different whistle this time around, but okay. At this point, I'm not even honestly surprised. Thomas tries to reassure Victor that whatever it is probably okay. Except when Thomas gets a bit of a, shocking surprise when he encounters Diesel 10. Also, may I just give credit for how bloody good Diesel 10 sounds? He sounds so bloody malicious, and this time he sounds so devilish. That's true to the Diesel 10 we all know and love. But I also want to give credit on this one because, yep, apparently Sodor has a city. Also, I wanted to give attention to some of the graffiti art. Viva la Ringo. That's as a reference to Ringo Starr, which pretty funny. And we even have this one saying, Mr. Conductor was here. Now he's kind of starting to put in a couple of references towards Thomas and Friends for the fans. Yeah, Thomas is a little surprised when he sees Diesel 10. Who wouldn't blame him? But then the rest of the team roll up and are ready to get Diesel 10's big mechanical claw butt booted. Also, if you have photosensitivity with light, this is probably not the series for you because of the countless, flash moments or something. Then Thomas Supreme rolls up and is like, alright, 10, you've done enough. But 10's like, nah, screw you, I got my homies. Of which are depicted as Ari, Bert, Diesel, and Salty? Okay, I'm not sure why Salty's here, since he's clearly known as a nice Diesel, but okay. He looks insane, man. Yeah, I be sorting ketamine. Oh god, he's gone mental. And so Diesel 10 is like, you think you're tough? Well, I got this. And then they have their own transformation into Devastator. Equally as badass, I'll be honest. Looks place. Wasn't really scared by this when I was younger, more than I was, whoa, that's cool. Then, kablamo. Supreme gets knocked back. Oh, another Thomas reference. Old Crofts. Cool. Then it's kind of unanimously agreed that they'll probably need another engine to assist. As such, they get Hero up in the game. I'd also want to give credit towards Hero's design as well, but I'll make this quick. He has the same issues as Gordon. No cylinders and no tender. And his sidewalls also look inaccurate for some reason. Don't try to extend it to, fit 8 wheels. And also, Hero essentially gives out a battle cry of Kawasaki! Which, as James Farr said, is meant to be a reference on how Japanese D-51 classes, of which Hero is based on, some of them were built by Kawasaki in Japan. So a little something for hardcore railway fans who might be intimate on engine designs as a whole. And now they become Samurai Supreme. But they appear to still be losing against Devastator until Percy's arm spits out a couple spin dice ninja stars. Also Hidden Entertainment. Hidden Entertainment will be relevant later. And then boom. Devastator ends up becoming damaged, but there is they are still adamant on winning, and then also hit detector. Hidden Entertainment will be relevant later on. Then, as a counteract for this, the Vector sends himself in a little Thomas-looking jetpack, sending the missiles the other way, and then just moving aside and lets the missiles strike Devastator, putting an end to them. And then Vector is then declared a hero of Sodor. And also, yeah, this is silly. I like it. Also, you may recognize something. There appears to be a flag here saying Team Edward. Yeah, you may have noticed that Edward and to an extent Toby don't appear to be in action here. You might see I will touch on Edward and Toby later on, but for now, let's move on to episode 4. Episode 4 is where things really take a turn for the series. I love how the opening credits in the 4th episode, Bill and Ben Entertainment. So here he references Bill and Ben, but he doesn't try to include them or reference them in like the episode itself. Strange choice, Mr. Farr. Strange choice. Now we have Transformers. You get it? 4. Anyway, once again, the animation is equally as good as ever, except now Thomas's side profile appears to be updated. Good for him. So Thomas is on his way back from collecting some top secret cargo, and this time he's actually pulling a train, including that of his faithful coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, with the narrator following up with a line, "See, we do your mail." Yeah, you bring Annie and Clarabelle, but you don't bring Edward or Toby. You also may have noticed this green box fan at the back saying Muffle Mountain Military Base. Not just as a reference to Muffle Mountain from Thomas and the Magic Railroad, but the engine that's associated with Muffle Mountain will become relevant later on. Thomas is returning home with Vector after collecting some cargo. Yeah, it's not really as British, but honestly, I can deal with Thomas not being British this time around, because he's cool. Also, Clarabelle's also facing the wrong way, in case you may have noticed. Muffle Mountain Military Research. How interesting. Then Jumbotron informs Thomas and Vector that something appears to be heading down the line towards them, of which being Bertie? Okay, he's probably breaking a couple of laws by driving on the rails, but okay. Also, the poor red buses appears to be also under Muffle Mountain Military Research branding as well. Also, can I give mention here? You can see Thomas's wheels just don't exist. Also, Thomas appears to get a slight upgrade where his cab windows are now black on the inside. And then, well, Bertie doesn't move off the line in time, and crash! Bertie sends the portang engine derailing, tankers and trucks flying everywhere, destroying everything around them. Yeah. This sadly leaving Thomas immobilized. And, in a style similar to the movie Super 8, well, the box fan appears to break open, and then we see what was concealed in it. Lady. I told you she'd be relevant. Also, I have to give some credit to the badass voicing for Lady here, because, whoo baby.
Too long I have hidden in the dark, awaiting my return. But with Diesel's head defeated, I will see the whole world.
Lady then hops up in a very dramatic manner, and then, ay, caramba! That's a spoopy ass face. Then we have Tricerachnus. Probably for the fact that it's like a spider type thing. Oh god, Lady's freaking face got real spoopy this time. And so, Thankfully, Trombotron is still available to Vector via a watch type thing, and so with Thomas immobilized, the rest of the other engines we have seen thus far appear to just have disbanded. But not all of them. But we'll touch on that in a moment. Also, Sodal Scrap, your final rusting place. Okay, that's actually kind of clever. I like how, like, basically all the engines here appear to be just golden, but without their faces, and salty. I just love that. That's so silly. And then Dracarachnis makes herself known and and says it's time to bring her evil master back to life, and appears to try and bring sentience to the scrapped engines until another female engine makes herself known in the form of Rosie. May I question why Rosie has pink lips and pink wheels? Yeah, whatever. Guess it's a design choice. Pink wheels kind of look cool on Rosie anyway. It appears that Vector this time around has actually gotten Rosie involved, alongside Emily, Molly, Mavis, and Belle. Then all 5 female locomotives combine into Rosimus Prime. And then, well, another fight ensues. They send a big, like, nuke strike or something, striking Lady, breaking through bad robots, screening or something. Like, oh snap! That was unnecessary things thinking, what in the freak wrong with me? Or Lady Sector. Funny. And they've recently realized that recently. And as they are flying to look for Lady, the magical engine seems to catch them off guard, sends them to the ground, and then, yeah, Brosimus Prime is kind of left immobilized. They're more like robots this time around, which, strange choice, but, don't fully blame them. And then Lady gives off a little bit of a monologue, until she's seemingly just blown up, reduced to nothing but a pile of rubble. By who, you may ask? Well, Optimus is still alive, rocking a new look as well. Personally, my favorite take on Optimus Prime's design. It just looks so cool. It's cool. Like him. So it appears that Optimus is back. And then wait, what's that? And then boom. It appears little Thomas is sent flying backwards and dies. Oh, yeah, he actually died. Damn. And then we realize who's killed him, of which being a strange new Autobot, or Auto Train or something, later named Scrapwave. If anyone was confused with what he said at the end, he said playtime's over, Thomas and friends. And then laughs, and then, okay, that's a bit of a cliffhanger to end off with. Oh boy, that's a cliffhanger, if I've ever heard of it. So, the 4th episode got kind of dark, with essentially our main hero dying. Now, you remember earlier I mentioned hidden entertainment would become relevant later on? Well, this is about the time where they become relevant. When hidden entertainment caught wind of James Farr actually getting profit off the Transformers animations, needless to say, they weren't really pleased that one of their IP were being used for something it wasn't. As such, very sadly, the original upload of the first 4 episodes were removed for the sake of not getting a lawsuit, which, very sad. This time, and so James Farr was originally planning to make episode 5. The original plot that was that the episode would have Thomas and his friends, of Thomas coming back and he and the rest of the engines fighting against Devastator. No, Christ's sake, I mean Scrapwave as a new being, as a Optimus Omega, if you will. Though this was before Hidden Entertainment's sad removing of the original episodes. However, we did episode 5 still came out, and is the only old episode from the early 2000s that wasn't removed or re-uploaded. However, before the episode began, we got this Fun Police. You can pause to read all this, but essentially, it basically is kind of this Transformers way of saying, yeah, Hidden Entertainment decided to go and be a bitch and remove the original uploads. How very rude of them. And so, sadly, as the we see, it seems that Transformers 5's main image comes up until we get an unidentified voice at the back calling cuts, and that the production was cancelled, leaving Vector, unsurprisingly, quite confused. And then came Hit Entertainment's cease and desist, essentially saying that Vector was playing with toys that never really belonged to him. Even if he did like them, maybe perhaps they never liked him, or something. And as thus, production was cancelled, leaving Vector a little bit bewildered on what to do. But Robotron was still there, because, hey, she's an original character, and she makes it. She's not really part of Thomas's IP, so, hey, Robotron is still around. Nice. Then Vector eventually kind of walks out, kind of confused on what to do, until yeah. Scrapwave is still active. So essentially, Scrapwave was also an original character. As such, he wasn't really shut down, as it were.
Holy crap, he's right.
Oi, watch out, we do not swear. Well, sometimes we do, but whatever. And so it was then Vector quickly made it into a golf cart, which apparently takes him on a studio tour. And then Victor's kind of taking on a bit of a wild ride in an attempt to escape from from Scrapwave. I keep saying Devastator. God damn it. So yeah. They are on the run, going past T-Rexes, sharks, and House of Horrors, and Star Wars location? Okay. Destroying the golf cart, sending Vector flying into a prop house, and hitting and going through a billboard of the Mighty Kong. And then, well, we cut back to Devastate, to our main antagonist being like, yeah, where are you, homie? And then, Vector appears to, as it were, seemingly have his own Autobot. That wasn't really Thomas. Well, we'll see in a moment, though. And then, out of the prop house comes a robot of Mighty Kong or something. Scrapwave attempts to destroy Victor, but then it fails. Strikes him back in the face, and then with one mighty with one mighty punch, it puts the Transformer out of business, leaving Troubletron to say, well, that's it then. We've come to the end of the tracks, with Victor replying that where they're going, they don't need tracks. Yeah, that's very much an obvious reference to freaking. What was it? Back to the Future, I think? And thus ends episode 5. Yeah. Definitely a little more creative this time around, since, well, Thomas wasn't in the episode. So, okay. Cool. Cool. Cool beans there, buddy. As after that, Transformers seemed to just go on a bit of a hiatus. It stayed it stayed quiet for a good while. That was until it comes across a parody. 2014, we got a parody trailer, which is essentially a Transformers Age of Extinction parody. Eh, which, for I'm assuming the plot is that of Thomas's Thomas's scrapped remains being hauled off for scrap, and then Vector realizing, wait, we have a Transformer. This could be actually kind of badass. Though it was also as a reference to how I think Age of Extinction seemed to have a lot of the American flag shoved all over the place. Vector and James Farrell out as well. It appears Thomas is still blue, but for obvious reasons, for copyright reasons, he had to try and censor his face and number being visible. Probably in case hits, or at this point, Mattel Creations attempted to put him under the copyright ban once more. And so, well, apparently, Age of Extinction is actually happening. Is an actual film that James Farr himself is attempting to make. Only this was revealed recently, so sick. Optimus Prime appears to now become boom, a faceless robot. Fair enough though. We see the Show silhouette and what's meant to be Megatrain or Galvatrain. And, well. And then they kind of combine. Optimus combines with Devastator and then trailer ends. What a plot! Oh boy. After that, Transformers, once again, went dormant. After that, it seemed that Transformers might have fully well been dead. There was no bringing it back. That was until Christmas 2019, Christmas of 2018. The Transformers Christmas Special. Okay, things are getting a little interesting now. This, you could probably write this off as not canonical to the original Transformers series, but okay. It appears now this new episode apparently takes place in space, with more cartoony trains, which is kind of silly, Billy, and a redesigned looking, I forgot her name, what was she meant to be for? Troubletron? It appears that Troubletron also seems to have gotten a new look. Though since these new characters, other words, Clunk, Quark, Quasar, and Cole, you get it, it's a steam train. So, it was confirmed in the live stream by either James or Vector, who Vector at this point was a teenager. Good for him. That the idea for this episode was not only to make a Christmas special, because he doesn't like a little Christmas special now and then, but also to see if they could make a Transformers installment without Thomas's IP being used. And to some varying degrees of success, I don't hate it. The character designs are kind of silly. They're kind of cool. Granted, they're much more cartoony, but okay. Also, little joke here.
No joke, I just tooted.
Bruh. I just. I love how after Cole was like, I just tooted. He just like, you kidding me? He just looks so. He's just so bored and annoyed with him. And then it appears that up in space there appears to be a buttload of trouble as we see some weird robot thing called the Black Hole of Joy, as he calls himself, apparently being rolling into the scene, and well, essentially trying to remove to ruin Christmas for those on Earth. And well, then we have a more teenage or preteen age Vector calling the crew, and they're like, "Yo, homies, we need someone to catch this dude." And they were like, "Nah, mate, we're on it." And this time we don't see, but now we have four little robots. Ironically, this is kind of funny. But Black Hole of Joy is well, he's not stupid and basically attempts to suck all four little transformers into, well, something, I get, into his black hole, as it were. Except, plot twist, Troubletron's also a locomotive. Oh boy, now things are getting ridiculous. This definitely feels like a more sci-fi-esque version, or maybe more space-themed, I guess. And so, yeah. Then, when all five locomotives kind of combine efforts, they become Trouble Titan Omega, also a Herald silhouette. And so then, with the power of love and all that ever loving piece of poop, abracadabra, alakazam, this poor man is to be taken to the scrap man. If you know Sam Strange, you'll know who I mean. And then, this series also has a weird thing with rhyming, which, whatever. And then appears to be a Christmas star? Yeah, this got weird. And yeah, I think that's all we can really bear for the Christmas special. So, was the Christmas special good? Yeah, it was alright. Obviously, they attempted to make it, like, not related to Thomas, and it was cool. And after that, the series then probably looked like it would never be seen again. Until 2021. As a sort of reverse April Fool's prank, James Farr kind of leaked that kind of dropped a long awaited return for Thomas in the form of Transformers Reborn, Optimus Prime Returns. What many call their favourite installment of the series. Personally, I don't hate it. I certainly don't, but it doesn't really capture the charm that the original episodes did. It kicks off with Troubletron being reactivated, seeing a more young adult version of Vector, questioning, like, you sure you're Vector? And he's like, well, the Von plays suck, trying to freaking cancel the show. And then she's like, oh, wait, you are Vector. I thought the series was dead. And then he's like, well, hold your horses, homie, because this series about to get lit. Also appears now we have Farquhar Sheds, or whatever you want to call them. And then, boom! That was very delayed. Thomas is back, rocking a new look. Wait, he has a. Does anyone realize he has a grey tongue? Oh, that's. Why is his tongue grey? That's weird. I also love how Thomas's like model looks so much like the Hornby Thomas, which is. I'm sorry, it is. It looks so much like the Hornbeams almost. I can't help it, it's funny. So it appears that Thomas, Vector, and Troubletron are back in action. And just in time, as there appears to be another foe trying to corrupt the island of Sodor in the form of a, well, pretty big name, of which being called Unigalva Deca Mega Scrapatron. Of all of which a mental name appears to be all of the previous Transformers that Thomas has defeated over the years, seemingly combined into one humongous Transformer, under the control of the Fat Controller. Yep, finally the Fat Controller rolls his fat ass up. Yeah, so the engines also appear to have gained a new style this time around. Thomas questions Topham on his choices of trying to be rid of him, on why would he want to reconstruct a new robot, of which Topham's saying that he just wants to be rid of his engines. At first he thought the sentient engines would be a cool idea, but he says himself, emotional hardware is really the worst. Also, Waterton. That was there since the early episodes too, so little Grey Waterton reference. Speaking of water, someone's practically plunges into it. And also his cab seems to just to kind of close in. Maybe it was something to like keep Vector from drowning. But Thomas, nah, he isn't gonna be knocked out he isn't getting knocked out that easily again. Thomas's cab, now soaked with water, is now more determined to be rid of Fat Man. And then the long-awaited moment comes where Thomas again transforms into a yet again updated Optimus Prime. Now with using similar methods of anti-collabo being guns, which we saw in the 4th episode. Except when Thomas tries to charge up to him, the Factor just knocks him back. And then he's like, "You ain't taking me that easily, fool." Oh, look at that, it's Laurie too. From Horror Lorries. Cool. And then Claremont are brought out to bring the big guns. Also, Harold the helicopter and that one plane from Blubber. I forgot her name. Then Thomas is like sending bullets flying the Fat Controller's way, knocking off the hat, and once again, the Fat Controller kind of pushes things far now and just sends a big laser flying Thomas's way and pow! Sends the poor Transformer flying in reverse, crashing into the shed. Then we get a brief explanation on what the heck a unit alpha mega whatever it was actually is. And Victor eventually deciding, no, we need to get everyone in it now. And as such, we get calling all engines. Movie reference. And this time it appears we're getting all of Thomas's friends in on it. And then, kaboom! All the engines up. Now we have a bigger cast of Thomas characters than ever. Not only the characters we've seen before, but even long-awaited characters to make an appearance. Edward, Toby, Rusty, Victor, Duck, Stepney, Bill, Ben, Charlie. Literally, a lot of characters come back. Characters we've seen before, and new characters too. Charlie, Gina, Reg of all characters, Bash, Dash, Ferdinand, Ryan. There's 2 planes from Bill Big Adventures. And then comes Optimus Omega, where we see these engines apparently kind of combine forces. And thus we have the updated Optimus Omega. And then the fucking show is like, "You think you're so smash, I'm the controller of the railway." And then Vector's like, nah, fool, I ain't being taken for a fool. And then, yeah, honestly, a very anticlimactic way to just defeat your big villain. And, wait, caution, fooling comebacks. Yep, reference to the first episode. I love how Tobin just kind of pops up, he's like, yeah, I'm not your fault for this. Funny. And then, boom. Even got Scruffy up in here. So it appears that Sodal has been saved. Hooray! So then they eventually realize, wait, what are we doing now if Sodal's fine? We go to space. We built a city and leave no evil ignored. And then they all fly to space. Interesting. Whoo boy. The long-awaited return of Thomas and his friends was quite crazy. For one thing, the engines have all gotten upgrades. Now they're more faithful to how they officially look. Not to mention they gain these weird ring-styled wheels, which is kind of weird. And of course, the bigger engines gain their tenders. Not sure why Rusty and Vector are on standing gauge rails, but okay. We also have Duck. Duck! And also, Stepney! Okay, Stepney's sidebars are breaking reality, okay. And then, I do like these. I know many people go on the record saying the new style for the engines is just so much better, and is so cool. But for me personally, there's just something about the older engine designs that just sits with me better than this new style. I don't mean to discredit James Farr by any means. Your videos are amazing, but it's just my personal opinion that I kind of prefer the older engine designs, just for the sake of their simplicity and silliness. Then we thought, well, okay, maybe is he still doing Transformers? And trust me, he most certainly is doing Transformers. Not in the way you think, though. We appear to have a game trailer? Okay. Odaclick Game Studios? What do they have to do with this? Wait a minute. A Transformers game? Well, you bet your bubbling boilers they is sure as hell. Now, James Farr has actually spent the past, 3 or so years making a Transformer game. Wow. Also, who allowed those last from Zootopia to just roll up? Go back to Zootopia, you silly belly. Also, I like this little guy here. Kind of reminds me of Toodles from Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. He's cool. And then, oh, that's cool close-up shot. I like that. With a severely underrated cover of I've Been Working on the Railroad as well, because, oh, it's heaven. Apparently done by Megan McDuffie, if anyone even knows who she is. I don't, but okay. And we apparently have a new engine in town, who doesn't seem to be in Thomas, but if he's going to make this a game, he would probably have to try and change the style to not make it copyrightable by Mattel standards. So, here's the boy! Known as Tender Tech. He's a happy little chap. He's kinda cool. We see the little guy kind of taking his daily stroll. You rule the rails! It's essentially a load of game genres kind of combined into one, with the idea of trains as well. You just you can just get really fancy Nancy and cool. If you have not checked out this trailer yet, You better do so, because Superconductors is about to be the peakest game of all the games. Wow. Wow. What trailer? I don't, do you think I should play a game when it comes out? Tell me in the comments. Also, has anyone realized that he appears to have, like, the colors of the Sodor flag? Has anyone realized that? Coincidence, maybe? Also, whoever this little dude right here is meant to be, he's kinda cool. Reminds me of, like, Toodles from Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, as I've said earlier. As of now, the game is set to have a release date in June, not June, around spring this year. So, wow, that game looks really good. So, yeah, that's almost all of the content. But I have some interesting ideas to show you. First up, you may wonder, where was Edward during Transformers? Well, he apparently was going to be in the original Transformers, but just never did. Maybe because of Mattel's his Entertainment's copyright thing. As a matter of fact, him and Toby apparently had official models in the original Transformers style that were made, but were never used. And I have to say, holy moly, I feel so completed now seeing these two. I just love them. They look so awesome. Now then, I propose a rewrite of Transformers to give it a somewhat more conclusive ending, maybe, instead of just churning it out, because hopefully James doesn't do that. So, let's kind of go over it. Here's how I'd personally try to rewrite Transformers events to make them kind of flow better, if you catch my drift. The first three episodes would remain mostly unchanged. There's nothing really had to change about them, they're fine. The fourth episode is when I'd change a few things. When Thomas is knocked out, when Thomas is taken out for the count, he kind of plays off Thomas's death as if he's just a robot, just breaking and just malfunctioning, which it doesn't really fit right work with me, honestly. It sounds like you're trying to make Thomas a robot, which essentially you are, but not trying to make him like a train with a face that isn't just like a mechanical being. I don't know, just it doesn't feel right, if you know what I mean. So I personally have the ending of the episode being that Thomas is not back and then just kind of coughs and then it's like, I didn't see that coming. And then he just dies. Well, he doesn't really die, but whatever. Then episode 5 can play out in a similar manner. Episode 5 could have, like, whatever in it, honestly. It could work as its own unique idea. The ending, however, is that we have Vector seemingly, after he destroys Scrap Wave, he realizes, who really am I without Thomas? John Watson tries to be supportive, but, she is only an AI. There's only so much you can do. And so, Vector's kind of left to wonder, what is there he can honestly do? Since I also have the beginning bit of the episode being that the guy at the beginning saying, "Yeah, well, the guys that hitting and tail of the fun police been saying you've been playing with trains that ain't yours." It's like, I like those trains. Well, they don't like you. Is now what they're meant to do. And then, he leaves. So then we can have the sixth episode play out in a very similar manner. The episode kicks off much like the Gauge of Extinction trailer, where Thomas's busted remains are being hauled away. Back on Sodor, Thomas's busted body is being hauled away by Edward. Just in case, they had covered up Thomas's face with a smokebox door to prevent him from being noticed, with Edward saying something along the lines of, "Oh, Thomas, why didn't you let me and the others know? Who'd have helped you?" Thomas only really is knocked out, and once they take him to like pseudo cybernetics, Thomas is kind of essentially wakes up and he's like, "Where's Vector?" And Edward, and then like maybe Percy and James are there as well, and like, "Vector's alright, but his entertainment isn't. Yeah, they tried to remove us. When we wanted to be different, they just couldn't bear it. And so they removed him from you." And then Thomas would reply with, "Oh no, I failed him." And then Ed was like, "You didn't fail, Thomas. It's fine. His entertainment wouldn't have liked it regardless anyway." And so Thomas decides, it's about time we fight fire with fire. So he gets the list of other engines, including ones we've not seen yet, like maybe Bill, Ben, Stepney, Whiff, and Duck maybe, I guess. I don't know, just ideas. And so they all kind of combined efforts and become Thomas Omega, and essentially Scrapwave doesn't exactly get killed, but more or less he's able to reconstruct himself somehow. You can write off with some like cybernetic logic or something. And then, more than ever, willing to be rid of Thomas and his friends. And then they kind of go out in an all-out, full-on boss battle, and Thomas and then up Thomas Omega does end up winning, and then everyone is able to kind of relax and then kind of return home, all feeling like really useful or whatever. And so that's how I'd probably redo like the events of Transformers. And in conclusion, Transformers is a pretty underrated series, and honestly, hopefully whatever new projects are coming up related with it will be good. With that said, I'm that well as a Train fan. This video was an hour long, I apologize for that. And with all that said and done, I'll see you guys later. And thank you for 800 subscribers. Goodbye.